Standing here, preparing to address this joint session for the 12th and final time, I am reminded in the most compelling way of the principles that led me to choose a career in public service, the principles that continue to guide me to this very day.
That's former Governor George Pataki from back in 2006, delivering his 12th and final State of the State address in Albany. He was the last Republican to win statewide office here in New York, a state now dominated by Democrats. You might remember in 2015, he announced a run for president, eventually dropping out in that crowded race that ended with former President Donald Trump securing the nomination and winning the White House. Pataki, though, is still active in politics and has plenty to say about what's happening in Albany and Washington, D.C. And George Pataki, who served as the 53rd governor of the state of New York, joins me now here in studio. Thanks so much for coming in. It's good to see you.
Great being with you, Michael. Nice to be back.
Thank you. So before I ask you about politics and government in New York State, you were a presidential candidate not too long ago.
Right.
We obviously have a big race coming up in November. Tomorrow is a big point in this race. Just to remind our viewers here, it's at 8 o'clock tomorrow night when coverage will begin here on 7 ABC. The debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden begins at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. You have not always been the biggest fan of Donald Trump. Where do you stand on that now, and what do you expect to happen in the debate?
You know, I honestly think the debate tomorrow night is the most important of my lifetime. And I'm not as young as you, Michael. I've been around a little bit. I think there's going to be massive viewership because people are uncertain about both candidates. There's a real question, is Biden mentally up to the task of being president for another 4 years? I have my doubts. And there's a real question as to whether Trump has the personality, the ability to serve 4 years as a stable, effective leader of the country. So I think tomorrow night is going to answer those questions for most people.
You are a lifelong Republican. I mentioned during the intro there, you're the last Republican to win statewide in the state of New York. Right now, if you look at the legislature, for instance, the breakdown, Democrats have supermajorities in both the Senate and the Assembly. What do you, as a former leader of the party and someone who's still, I guess, a party elder, right? What do Republicans in the state of New York need to do to, in some ways, just get back to relevancy here in New York?
I think there's a tremendous opportunity for Republicans because I think there's a real sense across the state that this state is failing, that it's not doing as well as it should be. And you just pointed out, it's one-party leadership in Albany, it's one-party leadership in New York City, and they're just not succeeding. Our taxes are too high, our crime is too high, our schools are not good enough. Too many successful people are leaving the state. So I think Republicans have a very real opportunity, but you have to have a message that appeals not just to Republicans but to Democrats as well. And that's not that hard to do because people want the same things.
I spent some time today looking back over your campaign when you ran for president in 2015 for the 2016 cycle, the cycle in which Donald Trump won the Republican nomination. There was a New York Times article. The headline for it was "George Pataki adds a socially liberal voice to the race for the GOP nomination." Considering the politics across the country, really, is there room right now for a socially liberal voice in the Republican Party or a conservative voice in the Democratic Party? Where are the moderates across America?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a social liberal. I call myself a social moderate. I believe that on abortion, it should be a woman's decision. And I think the vast majority of New Yorkers agree with that. But the answer is yes. You know, extremism doesn't work. Whether it's crazy people in my party, and we have our crazies, or the leftists who call themselves progressives in the other party, they can't govern. And we're seeing that in Albany, where we have a very left-wing state Senate and Assembly that I believe are making the decisions that have made this state too dangerous, the taxes too high, and people too pessimistic about the future. So it gives Republicans an enormous opportunity to win all across the state and even statewide. You know, I'm not a believer that a Republican can't win statewide. A person can. You just have to reach out to Democrats. You can't just campaign among Republicans, but make the case to the Democrats why tougher policies on crime, lower taxes, controlling spending, better schools are not just Republican solutions, they're people solutions.
Finally, when you were governor, in terms of Western New York, you had a big focus on the Buffalo waterfront, a big focus on the medical campus. Both of them have just exploded and are so important to our region now. What do you think, looking now at the growth in those areas, and if you were governor today, what would be your focus for Buffalo, for Western New York?
You know, I think I'm really proud of how those have worked out, the Inner Harbor and the medical center and everything. And we had this vision of centers of excellence across upstate New York, and in Buffalo would be in bioinformatics, combining the health with supercomputing technologies that exist at Buffalo's campuses. And I think that's what is still lacking. A better economic climate across the board, lower taxes, a lower regulatory burden, but also a vision, as to what are the greatest economic opportunities available to Buffalo in the future. And what we did is we brought together academia, because we have great universities, private sector leading companies, and the not-for-profit sector. And instead of having them operating independently, we brought them all together to come up with a vision and to support that vision. And that's why the medical corridor is doing so well. And that's what I would do, is I'd look at that again. I'd sit down with those three groups, the business community, the educational, and the not-for-profit community, and have a vision as to the next thing that could be that area of growth for all of Western New York.
You'll be watching the debate tomorrow night, along with tens of millions of others?
Everybody tells me I have to, but I will.
We'll be watching as well. Former Governor George Pataki, thanks so much for coming in studio.
Great being on with you. Thank you.